Welcome to another episode of Distry. My name is Kirk from... Where am I even from? I always said from Disney Cicerone. I'm already messing up. I don't care. Leave it in. From Walrus Carp. And tonight we're going to be looking at the Phantom Manor because Kate had just come back from a European venture and it's fresh on the minds. And we just thought, what a better way to celebrate the spooky season with a really fun Haunted Mansion multi-part series, but we're thinking probably 3 to 4 episodes max just to get us through October, and then we'll start doing some one-offs and some deep dives as well. So with me, as always, is the Parisian pal, the...
Parisian pal.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I didn't have a...
This is where you got to bring Ghost Host back. This is your moment.
Okay. Okay. And Ghost Host, Kate the Disney Cicerone, my Spectral Sally.
Spectral Sally.
Bye. Kate, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. That intro was something.
Horrible, dude. What was that, 4.5 minutes? There goes our hook.
Yeah.
People dumped off of this thing like instantly.
I think this will be a really fun series to do, especially just having come from it for me. But it's really, we've wanted to do this for a while. We're like, someday we'll get to Mystic Manor. Someday we'll get to Phantom. Because when we did our 16-part Haunted Mansion series, like, we just needed to be done with that series. Not that we don't love the Haunted Mansion. I think of all the people, we love the Haunted Mansion like crazy. Like, I think we're both fans from the Haunted Mansion. But, you know, you just get to a point where you're like, let's just move on to another topic for a while. So it's really fun now to come back to the Haunted Mansion and kind of bring back some of those things that we talked about.
But wait, there's more. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we needed to take a break, and it's been a while. I mean, we had a really nice long jaunt with Jungle Cruise, but it's nice to step back into the spooky realm.
It is, for sure. And the perfect time of year for it as well.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to probably not get fully into the manor. I want to say the mansion. The manor. Got to use my different lingo. But we're going to talk about some of the concepts, the backstory. We're going to talk about Thunder Mesa. We're going to talk maybe a little bit about the music or narration. And then we'll see how far we get in the mansion or manor. That's going to be a thing all night. So just...
Oh, boy.
Sorry.
Oh, boy.
Just going to apologize now. But I feel like we have to talk a little bit and not a lot because we could do episodes on Thunder Mesa. But I feel like that's a good place to start. And then kind of, I feel like if we don't lead with the backstory of this attraction, it will be hard for people to follow this if they're not familiar with Phantom Manor. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, I think most people aren't even familiar with Disneyland Paris in general, right? Yeah. So we don't necessarily have to start with like the creation of Disneyland Paris, but I just think like the general area and why and how and the connections and then storyline and then roll into concept.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about on previous episodes, we've talked about the creation of Disneyland Paris and that it was Michael Eisner's kind of pet project. He wanted to make one of the most beautiful Disney park. He wanted to be his legacy. And I think he did accomplish that. It's very beautiful park.
Yep. Stop. It was today on October 6th at 8:48 p.m.
I mean,
Kate said that he accomplished making it the most beautiful park. Oh my God.
He almost bankrupted the company.
But did he? Walt almost bankrupted the company.
But did he? Different scenario there.
But is it?
Walt did it because he loved people. Michael Eisner did it for his ego. So different intention behind the creation. Anyway, let's move on from Michael Eisner. So Disneyland Paris opened in 1992, but when they were researching making this park, they really wanted to see what is it that people in France love about American culture. So they did a lot of research to figure out, like, you know, and there is a fair amount of it's kind of like a love-hate relationship, I think, with the French and American culture. Like, they love some of the things of American culture, but they also kind of hate American tourists. It's like, it's a thing. So They do, though. They're very, very fond of the American West and Southwest. So, like, the Wild
Yes.
West is like
Hmm.
their jam. So that's why the majority of resorts that are there at Disneyland Paris are all based in either the Southwest or the Old West.
It is funny how they all are. I mean, they love
Yep.
that style.
And so when Tony Baxter was taking this, and he's like, well, we need to just, make Frontierland just supersized. Frontierland is not like it is in the American parks where it is kind of like just this little space. It is like an entire land full of frontier goodness, I guess you could say, including which something we'll talk about later on in another Distery episode, the best version of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which is in the middle of the Rivers of America kind of area. So what Kirk is showing you there is some of the concept art for this area.
Yeah, you can actually see Big Thunder in the background. And to what Kate alluded, Big Thunder plays a role in the Phantom Manor. And it's pretty cool because this one is very unique in the fact that it is an island.
It is. And honestly, this area is so huge and highly detailed, and it has so much theming. And it's a beautiful area when you walk around it, just gorgeously done. And so where this idea for this area came from was Walt Disney World, believe it or not, because it was an idea that we talked about on our episode about the Western River Expedition. We talked about Thunder Mesa. And I do have a few just kind of pictures of that concept art just to give some context here. But that was this whole area that they had planned for Walt Disney World, but they never actually built it. So I have a great picture of the model here for Walt Disney World and all of the Imagineers standing around it. And you can see in the lower corner is a giant mountain range that looks like it's from the American Southwest that has never existed in Walt Disney World. And that is Thunder Mesa. So it's like this three attraction, huge mountain range that would have had a canoe ride, flume ride, would have had a runaway mine train, which might sound familiar, and also would have had something called the Western River Expedition, which was essentially, woo, yeah, that was essentially a Pirates of the Old West, Pirates of the Caribbean of the Wild West.
So beautiful.
It would have been amazing. You can see here, this is just a kind of picture of the concept art for Thunder Mesa, and you see waterfalls.
Literally had the face. Yeah.
I love it. So, yeah, so this never came to be mainly because of cost. We won't get into the whole history of it. Yeah, some people are asking, why didn't they end up building it? It was budget. The Western River Expedition itself had like 300 audio animatronics in it, which was very expensive. And so they did kind of break apart the concept, and long and short of it is they still built the runaway mine train version of it for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. And later, the canoe flume ride did become Splash Mountain, but not till years later. But Western River Expedition kind of just disappeared. And Kirk is showing you, I love that you have that because I have this. So I have the actual like model for this little saloon from this, and he has the concept art for it. And this was all made by Mark Davis for the Western River Expedition. And it was
a ride that should have happened, but never did. And mainly because of guests. So if you want to put any blame, put those thumbs right towards your chests, because all the Floridians who are used to the Caribbean, you would have thought, well, they like pirates, but they don't like them that much. So they figured Disneyland has the pirates. Florida actually has real pirates, so they don't need that attraction. But as soon as Walt Disney World opens, people were clamoring for the pirates. We showed the pins that said the pirates are coming. Yeah, they needed it. So as a result, this whole entire project gets tabled in lieu for creating a shortened, smaller, condensed pirate. But yeah, I mean, Mark Davis was he was so mad.
Yeah.
Just genuinely angry about this. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of retribution in the fact of how Phantom Manor gets built, and try to cement in your mind that saloon, horses, cowboys, the dual swinging kind of bar saloon, like doorway, entryway. Try to think of that as we continue to talk about the manor, because all of these things are actually going to come back. And you're like, how's that happen? Cool your jets.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of the concepts directly from the Western River Expedition we will see again. But I will say that Marc Davis wanted the Western River Expedition to still be built in Disney World. And so if anybody's ever wondered why Pirates of the Caribbean is just not as good as the Disneyland version, when in fact Marc Davis had worked on the previous one, you would think it would be like, why didn't they just make it as good? Part of it is because some of the scenes that are in there, like the ghostly grotto with all of the like kind of spooky figures in the rocks and whatnot, and the waterfalls that's in the Disneyland version, that whole scene was going to be in Western River Expedition in its own way, and it would have had little rabbits and rocks and like things like that. So he didn't want to repeat anything, because he's like, well, if we put it in this Pirates, then they won't want to build this one because they'll say we already have that. So the other thing he wanted was he hated the up waterfall that Walt had at the end of Pirates of the Caribbean, because he hated that you went like chug, 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 chug up the waterfall, and then you just kind of like slid into the water. You like don't go down a huge like drop, right? He's like, that's so anticlimactic. So he said, you know, like instead in this Western River Expedition, he was making a giant waterfall that you go up and then you have a huge drop, kind of like Splash Mountain-esque, if you want to just put it in some context. So he's like, well, so we can't put the up waterfall in, we can't put the ghostly grotto, and also they were looking to save costs because they weren't really intending to build Pirates of the Caribbean at all. So they're like, well, let's just cut out those scenes and those things and make it shorter. And so that's what you have, is you have kind of a shorter, not quite as great Pirates of the Caribbean in Walt Disney World for that reason, because he wanted to build this other attraction.
Boo. I love that attraction. It's my my third favorite in all of Walt Disney World. But every time I ride it, I go, Disneyland's so much better.
It is. It really is.
It really is. Like, there's no two ways about it. Disneyland is better.
Yeah. So long and short of it is that idea kind of just got shelved for a really long time, and Marc Davis was really just brokenhearted about it. And there's some quotes even of Alice Davis, his wife, saying, you know, how sad it made him that concept never worked. And Tony Baxter, there's some great quotes about him as well. He said that they would go and they'd look at this model that was like set up at, you know, WDI, and he would, you know, look at it and be like, this is amazing. Like, everybody would like go on their lunch break and like look at this incredible model that they made full scale of this attraction and can't wait to ride it, right? So everybody thought it was like a done deal, and then it just kind of got shelved because of expenses. So Tony Baxter kind of ended up making a smaller version of Thunder Mesa in this Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which actually, from what I've read, really made Marc Davis upset. That, like, you know, because it made this concept go away. And even though Tony Baxter, he did put like a little Conestoga wagon that said Western River Expedition in the model, and he wanted to have like a little indoor section that had pieces of it. Like, he tried, but everybody said like, no, we can't afford like the audio animatronics for it. So it basically, what I hear is that Marc refused to like talk to Tony Baxter after that. I don't know how true that is. It's just rumor. So, you know, just take that for what it is. But then what I hear is now this idea of Thunder Mesa coming back in Disneyland Paris, and Tony Baxter kind of adding in some of these pieces of this lost concept was supposedly kind of an apology and a way of making it up to Marc Davis that they didn't end up using this, and that he was part of the reason for it because he helped design Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. So that brings us to Thunder Mesa inside Disneyland Paris, which is what their Frontierland is kind of the town of Thunder Mesa, which is in here. So Jeff Burke was the Imagineer in charge of designing this Frontierland, and also Melanie Ravenswood Tragic Story. They knew that it needed to be told in a way that was different than the American and Japanese versions of this attraction, which had already existed, you know, at this point. So they're like, we have to figure out a way to tell this story that's different, because this is France, and one of
But
the
of course, this is
of
France.
course.
And the mesas here are never second.
So I've Rhonda's asking, are none of the signs in French? And actually, a lot of the signs are in French in Disneyland Paris, but not in Thunder Mesa because they wanted it to be distinctly American. So, which brings me to the name of Phantom Manor, which they threw around a couple of names for it. They were going to call it I'm going to butcher this French, and I'm sorry. So, Le Manoir des Fantômes. So that was going to be like the Manor of the Phantoms, right? But because they wanted it, this area was so steeped in U.S. history, the Imagineers decided it needed to be as authentic American a name as possible. But they're like, but if we call it Haunted Mansion, some people in France are going to be like, what is that? Like, I don't know what that is if they don't speak English. So they decided to make a name that was recognizable both to French guests and also American ones. So Phantom Manor was the solution to so everybody could understand it. I feel like we need to go over the backstory to really understand what this is. So
You want me to do the backstory?
yeah, go for it. I got
Okay.
a lot of other
Feel
stuff.
feel free to stop me because again, I'm going off of what I researched, not versus what I know or experience. So please, if I'm monkeying this up, stop me.
Before you like go into
Great,
the
I
actual
didn't even
story.
start, dude. Come on, you didn't even give me a
So
chance.
sorry. Well, because I want to set it up. So the inspiration for this story came from a couple of places. One was the Gaston Leroux's novel, The Phantom of the Opera. And also The Abandoned Bride was inspired by Miss Havisham from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, and also Walter Scott's The Bride of Lammermoor. So it's a story of a young bride with a doomed love. So that they kind of just picked, like they do in the U.S. parks for the Haunted Mansion, they picked a lot of classical literature and they pulled stories from that in order to tell this story. And so it's really interesting how they then use that and told this story. So I'm going to let you go now and I'll just show pictures and things. So.
No, that's awesome. I love that. That is really cool. I love when because we talked about that with the Haunted Mansion before, is how there was a lot taken from literary, A Telltale Heart with any of the Edgar Allan Poe, or potentially, what was the Changing Portraits? Help me out. I'm blanking on the name of the novel.
I don't know which one you're talking about. I mean, they had Dracula, they had Medusa.
No. The one where as soon as you walk in, pre-stretching room, Changing Man portrait of Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
geez.
yeah, it showed up.
Where
Look
did
at
that go? Portrait of Dorian Gray, which is a literary work about a man who's very handsome on the outside, but is very, very vile and disgusting on the inside. So when he sees this portrait of himself changing before his very eyes, showing his true inside, which is like the skeleton, gross. Anyway. This story is very heartbreaking, by the way. And when you actually experience the attraction, you see this physically happening, which also to me makes it very sad. But the story goes, and there is a connection here to Big Thunder. So if you're a Big Thunder fan, listen up. Henry Ravenswood, who was born in 1795, was a Western settler who struck gold in the Big Thunder Mountain, and he founded the Big Thunder Mountain Mining Company. Now, noted, this does not work. This actually is at odds with the storylines that we get in Walt Disney World. So please,
we just don't separate them in your brains.
Different mountains, just happens to be the same name mountain.
Same mountain, same name, but
same
different
company name, but. There is no Barnabas T. Bullion. It is straight. Okay, so Henry Ravenswood, we're focusing on Paris. Henry Ravenswood creates this city of Thunder Mesa, which we just went over, or as most people call it, Frontierland. And Ravenswood becomes the most wealthy person there because of the gold that they find in this mountain range. So for himself to kind of celebrate some of his success, especially finances, he built a high-perched up home, an opulent manor on the top of a hill overlooking not only is it the rivers of America still?
That's a great question. I questioned myself about that. So I'll know next week.
Rivers of Paris. No, the rivers of Thunder Mesa that overlooks the mountain range itself, as well as the mining company. Where he ends up raising both his, he has a daughter and his wife. So his wife's name's Martha. His daughter's name is Melanie Ravenswood. So he was born in 1795. Melanie is born in 1842. Now, Big Thunder Mountain was thought to be a local Native American home to the Thunderbird, which, not to be confused with a vehicle, but a rather powerful spirit, which, according to legends,
Silver
its
Thunderbird.
wrath would fall onto anyone who disturbed the mountain, which this is in conjunction with all of the other Big Thunder Mountain lore. However, Ravenswood would not believe the stories, and in fact, it would be more challenging for them to extract mine out or gold or out of the mines, so they would have to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, which technically is going to disrupt more of this Thunderbird spirit. We'll park that for a second. Melanie, his daughter, grows up to be a beautiful young woman. Obviously, she's got a silver spoon, you don't have to say it, but I'm going to say it. But no, she has actually a really interesting story. Because for her, she falls in love with a suitor who wouldn't necessarily be one that her parents would necessarily have her with, right? Like he's not from a super opulent or wealthy family. So instead, she just kind of like gets stuck in this place of wanting to get married to somebody, but yet her parents don't really approve, and particularly their father doesn't really approve of Melanie getting married.
I don't know how her mom feels about it. I don't know if we've ever gotten anything about her mom. It's definitely her dad. It's my little girl is not getting married and moving away from here ever.
But now remember, in the same time, Henry is digging away. They're mining over. And the further we go down, we're disrupting the spirit, and an awful, awful earthquake happens in 1860, which strikes Thunder Mesa and ends up killing Martha. So the Thunderbird family is now like awakened, right? Or his spirit is now awakened. So the story kind of gets a little wonky here. In like a good way, but Melanie's wedding day is now coming up. She's supposed to be like sitting there and waiting for her groom to show up. So she's excited, she's ready, she has her bouquet, she's excited to get married, and her suitor shows up to the house but never actually sees Melanie, because instead someone is now haunting the manor, and this haunt, or this disembodied spirit, is known as the Phantom. And the Phantom takes her suitor, goes all the way up to the attic with her suitor, and hangs him. So, which you guys can also remember from like our stretching rooms, where that's our ghost host being hung in the stretching room. In this case, it's the suitor of Melanie that gets hung by the Phantom, which, so basically, put it this way, the whole family gets cursed by this Native American spirit, Thunderbird, and as a result, Henry dies, Martha dies, Melanie has the love of her life die on her wedding day, and for the rest of her life, as everyone is leaving, because he's not showing up during the wedding, she's just left lonely to wander the halls for eternity, looking for her love and singing love songs. And she still is in her wedding dress, still carrying her bouquet, and still lurks around. But so you have Melanie dying alone, looking for the love of her life in the manor, and the manor is still being haunted by this Phantom. And as soon as you go into, it's actually really cool, like without getting into the attraction, but you actually see a picture of Melanie looking out the window for her lost love. And and that happens immediately when you're boarding. I don't know if they're called dune buggies, but
They are dune buggies there, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that I know. That was the official backstory from 1992. They did change it, though, in 2018. They changed it a little bit, more so to add extra things to the story than change it entirely. So they kind of just like clarified things because there was a lot of questions. And that was the original purpose, was that they would just make it really mysterious. There's this phantom, there's this bride, what's going on? It's just kind of like, who knows? But people are like, we kind of want to know what's going on. Just saying. So I have a quote from Imagineering and creative executive Tom Fitzgerald, who said, "We started by looking at the writings of Xavier Atencio, so X Atencio, the original author of the Haunted Mansion script at Disneyland. X created the character of the ghost host in the original show to thread together the various scenes Claude Coates and Mark Davis had designed for the show. We decided to expand the storyline of Phantom Manor through the ghost host character to shed light and shadow on the mysterious backstory of the Phantom, Melanie, and her unfortunate suitors. At the same time, we wanted to introduce some new illusioneering techniques to the show, and revised storyline gave us the opportunity to do so. So in this new storyline in 2018, they confirm that Henry Ravenswood is indeed the Phantom. And there's no doubt of it because of some of the things that are in the attraction, which we'll discover as we go along the way.
Yeah. So and matching this up with the storyline, remember, Henry doesn't want Melanie to get married to this suitor. So it would make sense that he dies in the earthquake with his wife, Martha. And when the suitor shows up, he's the haunt that doesn't want his daughter to get married to anyone that isn't, in his eyes, worthy enough of his daughter. So as a result, he kills him. Yes, Henry is her father. That's correct. Yes.
Henry is her father, and her father is the one that kills all the suitors. So, and it's dark. It's a dark story.
Honestly, I mean, as a father of girls, I get it. You know, I will be a future Phantom. Who knows?
Like, you are not good enough.
How many
daughter?
Earthquakes do we have in Florida?
Well, that ties in right into this, as I feel like we need to talk about the suitors themselves and their little stories, because we'll see them show up again and again in the attraction as well. So let's just go over those real quick. So instead of one suitor, like the original story was, her suitor's name was Jake. Instead, there is 4 of them that were noticeably killed in accidents that were implied to be staged by the Phantom or Henry, right? The first one is Barry Claude. So Barry Claude was chased up a tree by a bear, and the bear clawed his way up, and Claude never made it down. That's his epitaph. Yeah.
I got you.
So Barry Claude. Yeah. And so that's the first one. And then Sawyer Bottom is the next one.
What? How is that his name?
Well, because Sawyer ran the mill, but never saw the saw blade coming towards him, he got it in the end.
Okay. So what? All right. Here's Barry Claude. Where's Saw Dude at out of these? Because I have the other ones.
Dude, I'm trying to remember which one is which. I could not find like a whole.
I mean, this guy looks like Abe Lincoln. This guy looks like he's a naval captain, and this guy, I don't know.
Yeah. So you have to find like the full stretching portraits to be able to tell that, because when you see the full stretching portraits is when you see actually how they perished.
Okay, I got you. All right, I'll get it. Yeah.
So I'll say about Sawyer Bottom, he's the owner of T.M. Burr Lumber Company. Hold it together, Kirk. We gotta get through this part.
No, it's so good. It's so funny.
I thought I had a okay. So he's the owner of T.M. Burr Lumber Company, or Timber Lumber Company. And after the 1860 earthquake and decline of Thunder Mesa, the sawmill went bankrupt that he owned. And the sawmill was then abandoned for a time before being converted into a theater, but preserved some elements of its original decoration. So legend has it that the saw blade used as a basis for the porch chandelier was the one that killed Sawyer Bottom. So I actually have a picture of that here. is a saw blade that's turned into a chandelier. So a little something for you guys if you head to Disneyland Paris to look for is this saw blade. So the next suitor is Captain Rowan D. Falls. So this would be the one that looks like a sea captain, which, it kind of feels like it ties back into this whole sea captain theme of the Haunted Mansion that we've talked about forever, where the original backstory was Captain Gore and his bride Priscilla. And they did actually play around with that idea for this version of the Haunted Mansion to see, because they're going to have a bride and they're like, well, let's just see what we could do with it. But they decided they just wanted to go in a different direction with this backstory. So that's why they didn't end up using that. But I love that in the 2018 renovation of this ride, reimagining of this ride, they did introduce a sea captain character. However, he's not a vicious pirate. So it says
Wow.
he was, although adept at piloting riverboats, the poor captain met his fate when his when his rowboat plummeted over a waterfall. Autocorrect did that to me. So
Dude, this is crazy, man. These portraits are insane. Like this is the Saw one. This is the Barry Claude.
Yeah.
I got to get the other side. These are
Yeah.
so cool. Oh
Yeah,
man,
they're really
I
cool.
didn't know these things even existed.
And we'll talk
Now,
more about the stretching room when we get there, but I do want to just go over these ones. Sorry, what were you going to ask?
No, I'm just excited. Sorry.
I thought you would love the dad jokes that are involved
It's so
in
good.
these.
I didn't know these. This is so good.
Okay, so then the fourth one is Ignatius Knight, Knight, or Iggy Knight, as he's known, or Ignite, right? So Iggy, as he was known by, he ran the mines, but was shafted when a stray match from it lighted his pipe. Also ignited a stack of dynamite. This too is a reference to the portrait in the 1992 attraction. So you think of like the igniting a stack of dynamite, that was in one of the original portraits, which we'll get into later for the stretching room. But yeah, so he a stray spark like lit this and he exploded, and that's how he passed away. So yeah, it's
So
very
cool.
very much tied into that original concept that we know and love in the Haunted Mansion, where he's standing on a barrel of dynamite. So yeah, so that's the four suitors. And there's also kind of a storyline change too, where instead of Melanie she kind of like accepted that this was her fate at the end of the previous version, but now it's more like she goes crazy after being stalked by the Phantom. And she...
Yeah, because the original... Hang on. I think this is... So in 2019 is when we actually got all the suitors, but the original ones were these ones, right? Where Melanie's going over the rowboat. She's with Jake, and there's fire ants and
Like
scorpions,
insects.
tarantulas, rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
Some sort of creature, because that's not an alligator. That's a creature coming out.
Yeah, it's very much a Sally Slater nod, though, for the tightrope walker.
Oh, yeah,
because,
yeah.
there's an
That's a
alligator under
parasol.
her.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And then headstone, which again is like another kind of Constance one, because she's sitting up on that headstone again.
And this one very much is
And
foreshadowing.
she's holding
for...
a rose, and Melanie's planting her.
Yeah, it's very much foreshadowing for the Phantom, because he looks a lot like that in that original version, where he doesn't now. He looks different. So anyway, so the idea that she possibly goes crazy after being stalked by the Phantom is now kind of a new idea. And then she swears her allegiance to him, and her with her spirit offering to marry guests at the end of the new version of the ride. So it has her kind of like pleading, like, will you marry me?
I have to
And then
admit,
the Phantom
I
behind her.
really like the refurb.
I do
The
too.
2019 refurb. Normally, I'm a purist, and I'm with everybody like, oh, change, gross, get it out of here. I hate it. I'm not rejecting this one. I think this is a really strong... Granted, I don't have nostalgia. I don't have emotions. I don't have memories tied, so that helps me remove. This is better than the original.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think they really did a great job with these. And I have to say, when I was actually writing it, there were so many times when I like audibly like gasped because the like illusion was so good. I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't expect it because I'm so used to the US versions. And so it was so much fun to ride through. So anyway, that's most of the backstory of this. There is a lot more backstory to Thunder Mesa as a whole, but that is a tale for another day because we're going to stick primarily here with the Phantom Manor. Just as much as the backstory is important to the attraction, so is the music. I think is something really important for us to mention because if you think about this, Disneyland Paris is different than the U.S. parks in that it's a very international park. It is set in the middle of Europe. Well, not middle, but it's set in Europe. And there's all kinds of people from different European countries coming that don't speak all the same language, right? So English is kind of a common language between a lot of them. So a lot of things are in English and French in Disneyland Paris. But because of this multicultural experience here with many different kinds of guests from different countries, they had to make this park different than the US parks in that they had to make it so that everything was very obviously what it was without using any sort of language or signage. So that's why the Phantom Manor is very much like you look at it and you're like, that's a haunted house on a hill, which we'll talk more about that exterior in a minute. But and the same thing goes with Pirates of the Caribbean. It's very much like this is a giant fortress full of pirates. Like it's very obviously what it is. And that was intentional for the Imagineers to make it look that way. So just like how things look and the backstory is all really important, but the music is as well. To give this multicultural dimension for Disneyland Paris was like really crucial to both their atmosphere and their narration. So the illustrator and musician Christian Hope, in collaboration with Marco Monaghan and sound engineer Paul Ricciuti, experimented with sound. Their goal was to kind of articulate this gothic atmosphere of this new version as much as possible. So they adapted the original music from the Haunted Mansion, switching it from a walking rhythm to a waltz. And then they called in composer John Debney, who did the music for Hocus Pocus, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Iron Man 2, like very well-known composer. And he actually knew Buddy Baker really well. And we've talked about Buddy Baker many times here. Buddy Baker was Disney's studio composer. So he worked for Disney Studio, orchestrated all kinds of things. But John Debney knew Buddy Baker really well and kind of saw him as a mentor. So he saw doing this project as a tribute to his mentor, who was the one who did the original orchestration for the music in the Haunted Mansion in the U.S. parks. So he turned the music of Phantom Manor into kind of a huge theme and variations symphony. So he kind of just like, to put that in simple terms, he just kind of like remixed the music multiple times to make it draw different atmospheres for different parts of the mansion, what they were trying to communicate with the story. And it was also his idea to add Melanie's solo voice echoing from beyond the grave or wherever she's at. That voice is actually a voice of an Imagineer named Catherine Meiring, who had previously studied with Seth Riggs, who was a vocal coach for stars like Michael Jackson, Barbra Streisand, Stevie Wonder. And she does all that mournful kind of like singing and wailing and all those kinds of things in the Haunted Mansion, was an Imagineer, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we know how much soundscaping takes a part in the parks, and then obviously in the Haunted Mansion OG. I mean, it was huge. We learned all about diegetic and non-diegetic sounds, and I just think the fact that things are slightly amiss and askew throughout the composing, it sets and lays a tone.
It sure does. And I think it's really interesting some of the instruments they used in this as well. Before I get to that, I do want to mention that the score for the Phantom Manor was actually recorded at London's famous Abbey Road Studios, where the Beatles recorded, and also where they recorded, John Williams recorded music for Star Wars. So very, very famous studio is where that music was recorded, which music nerds like me are like, oh, that's so cool. So the rest of you are like, so. So one of I found some really interesting things that they used for the music in this, just a couple of instruments. And one of them was called a vibraslap. So the vibroslap was actually an instrument Kirk is showing you there, and it's based off of a jawbone of an animal. And they would have the teeth that were like loosened in the jawbone of this big animal, and so they would like hit the jawbone, and it create this like vibration, and then it would create this sound like it was rattling. So they recreated this instrument that's called a vibroslap that kind of recreates that. And it looks kind of like, it's like there's a ball that you hit with the palm of your hand, and then it's attached to a wire and kind of like a box on the other side. And that creates this kind of rattling sound. And that's what they used for, there's a scene later that's the catacombs when they're with the skeletons and there's bones going on and they're playing bones and bone sounds. They use the vibroslap instrument for that sound, which I think is really interesting. And they also use xylophones and all those kinds of things too that you think of when you think of that, like when they had the skeleton dance.
Would you like to see an actual vibroslap?
Yes.
You don't. Are you sure?
What is it? Yeah.
So here we go.
That's what I just told them. I told them
No,
it was a jawbone.
I know, but there's actual one. So a lot of times it was a donkey's jawbone.
Donkeys, yeah. I couldn't remember what animal.
Yeah, I had to look, but yeah, I mean they're just straight up hitting a jaw.
Yeah. So, the other instruments they used throughout this, the bass flute, that they use in the Phantom Manor is actually a tribute to Buddy Baker's original score, and it's included in the original loading scene. So that was a direct tribute. So when you load, listen for the bass flute. And the organ in it was recorded in a church in London, which is, of course, reminiscent of Johann Sebastian Bach's famous Toccata in Fugue in D minor, which is, Elliot can play that on the organ, and it's one of his favorites. So that's well-versed in that one. So that's just a little bit about the music. We could go on and on about that. But the last thing I'll say about the music in particular was that a lot of it borrows from Saint-Saëns' Dance Macabre, Dance of Death. He borrows a lot from those kinds of motifs that are in that music. So in case you're inspired and want some spooky music.
You want to listen to a vibroslap?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. It's like a very rattly.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's like I feel like I've heard that a lot for like a snake rattle tone.
Yeah, and it depends on where you hold the instrument, what tone you get from it.
Yeah, do you hold it on like the front teethers, or do you hold it in the back jowls as you're slapping the teeth? I don't know. Depends. Just kidding.
That's music portion of it, at least what's different. But you'll hear a lot of the similar music in the with just that you'll recognize a lot of the motifs, which a motif is like a few of the notes that are strung together that make like kind of what you know to be, Grim Grinning Ghosts, or the Ghostly Overture, I think is what that's called. Anyway, so you'll hear pieces of that in there. So in terms of the narration, I think the narration is one of my favorite parts here, but I want to mention it before we go into the mansion and kind of move room by room into the mansion. Because the narration is such an important part, because we're talking languages here. We're talking English, French. What are we talking? How is it working? And so they use a temp track soundtrack when they were making kind of storyboarding this attraction. And that's very, very common. They actually do this in movies all the time, where they'll make they'll put a track of music that they're like, something like this would be good here, and that's a cue for whoever's organizing the music, that like this is what the show writers were thinking of putting here. So they did this for the ride as well. They had Vincent Price's laugh from the end of Michael Jackson's Thriller. They said this is kind of like this would be great, but they liked it so much that they decided to just bring him on in to record. So Vincent Price in 1990 came on in and he recorded a new interpretation of the Ghost Host narration for the stretching room, the foyer, and the portrait corridor.
Now, if you are a fan of Vincent Price and you remember watching any of those spooky stories on TV, the big thing for me was Vincent Price was one of my favorite villains in Disney movies.
Mm-hmm.
He was Ratigan.
Ratigan.
You guys remember Ratigan? Oh, Ratigan. Oh, Ratigan.
That brings back memories.
Oh, I love when he would like ring the dinner bell.
Oh yeah.
He
So
was
that's
such
from
a good character.
that's from The Great Mouse Detective in 1986. In case you're like, who is Ratigan?
You're like, who's Ratigan?
I think my favorite part about Vincent Price recording this was when he saw the project's concept art, he cried out, "Feels like home."
Dude, I get it, man. Like, he's the dude. He was the dude. He gets it.
What happened though was right after they opened the attraction in 1992, the operators requested a French version because people didn't understand what was going on because it was in English. So Gerard Chevalier was brought in to record, and Vincent Price's laugh was still kind of like in the attraction for the Phantom, but he wasn't the narrator anymore. However, it's not the end of this story, because in 2018, they had a request to make it bilingual in English and French. And I want to say here that it was really interesting. They threw the idea out there because they had two stretching rooms, of having one be an English stretching room and one be a French stretching room. And they decided, just like logistically, it was too hard to organize guests to get them to go to the correct space. And they're just like, forget it. Like, we're just going to mix it all together. So that's what you hear today, is kind of a mix of both English and French. But they brought back Vincent Price's original recording, and they digitally restored it, and they brought it back. So now when you go on it, you hear Vincent Price narrating again. But
yeah, it's so good.
They also added in the French is done by Bernard Alain, who was Quasimodo in the French version of Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1996. So already had a Disney connection there. And then the sound designer Jake Ellis took two recordings and he made them like play in different areas of the room to keep an aura of mystery. So there's one in French and one in English, but they kind of play in different areas of the foyer to kind of like play with, you know, your perception of where it's coming from. Who knows? It could be anywhere. So, and the last thing I want to talk about in terms of sound, are you hiding from the Phantom?
Yeah.
Is the sound effect work that was done by Imagineer Joe Harrington, who was a successor of Jim McDonald. If you don't know who that was, he was Walt Disney's own sound technician. So the Haunted Mansion includes digital sounds. The Haunted Mansion in general, the US one, includes digital sounds and sounds recorded in nature. And some were even recorded at Disney's Golden Oak Ranch in Los Angeles, in the suburbs where many Disney films were shot. Other sounds were then played on machines invented and put together by Jim McDonald through 1934 and 1983. So he like invented these like sound machines to make specific sounds that he wanted, that they used in a lot of the Disney films and shorts and all the things. So Joe Harrington, because he was his successor, he just took a lot of those sounds and reworked them, or used some of the same techniques, and then used a lot of those sounds then inside Phantom Manor, which I think is really cool. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I have to admit, it's one of those things where, again, you know, we're not playing a lot of audio from this experience, and we'll probably have to sample some once we step foot into the attraction itself. But I implore you, if you're excited and there's no time for you to get out there to Disneyland Paris, please utilize any of the resources online to go and experience the attraction, at least visually and auditorily, because I watched it for the first time. I have been head in the sand for the Phantom Manor until this episode. I really have. I did a little bit of research because of Haunted Mansion previously, but before today, I never watched a POV because I was like, I don't want to spoil it or whatever. Oh, did I spoil it in the best way possible? That makes me want to immediately get on a plane and go to Paris.
I know.
It's so good.
It's amazing.
Like ungodly good.
I'm actually like sad that it'll probably be a while before I'll get back there, because I really just want to go back again and again and again.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Do we want to just do the grounds, the exterior, the house, and then kind of pause there?
Yeah. Can I talk for a bit? No, let me
Of course you can. You don't need my permission, Kirk. It's fine.
Yeah, dude, you were crushing it.
You just
I
need to
you
tell
were,
me like,
on a
Kate, like,
roll.
shut it.
No, you're on a roll, dude. I didn't want to ruin it. All right,
Well, I didn't
so
know how much you had about the music and sound
no,
and
I have
stuff, so
zero about the music, so it was perfect. You would have just listened to me do nothing. So,
at least I didn't
all
put
right,
you on the spot. I could have been like, Kirk, what do you got on the sound? You'd be like, nothing.
I would have been
Why
like,
do I do
man,
that to
talking
you?
about that Vibra No, all right. So exterior, what I love about the Phantom Manor is that I feel like we almost get what the manor originally had concept art for, right?
Haunted Mansion. Yeah.
Yeah. So the manor gets, so this is a very, very early Harper Goff rendition with this house on the hill, which had a church and a graveyard leading up to it. And then there was this haunted house on the upper right exterior. And it's just, it's in shambles, but I look at that steepled roof with the squared off tops. I go, man, that is very reminiscent. But hang on. But wait, there's more.
Wait.
I also have, this is a really, really, really old 1960s Ken Anderson, which again, I feel
That's
has
cool.
that's, yeah, right? Isn't this cool?
I
So
don't think I've seen that one before.
Look at this too. These little kids are like looking at the bushes like, oh, what is that thing? And honestly, this is what I would envision a haunted house would kind of look like, boarded up, a little bit more contemporary. This looks like it would be like kind of something that was from like the 40s or the 50s. But yeah, again, you're getting steepled roofs, boarded up building. You know, I feel like some of this gets utilized for this manor as well.
Yeah.
Another one that I was just looking back through my notes is this little guy, and this is a Mark Davis concept for an attraction that was never built, which we do have to go back and do an episode for, the Adventure House.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
to
yeah.
me, the Adventure House looks a lot like what our manor ends up being as well. So Disney is so great at repurposing great ideas. They almost like every great idea gets shelved, and it's just when do they want to pull from that inspiration? And I feel like that's what we get with this Frontier Manor exterior as well.
Yeah. We also have one. I have one from. This is the one up here that Kirk showed you as well. But there's one where there's the haunted houses at the end of the street, and it was going to be at the end of Main Street, USA. And Walt decided he didn't want it that close to the pristine Main Street, USA, so they moved it later. But that was the plan for that. Then there's also this San McKim one as well. Do you know all the actual ones references they used to inspire this? 'Cause I
No,
have a
like
few
actual
notes on that.
buildings?
Yes. Okay.
No. And do you need pictures? I'll start typing.
Edward Hopper's painting House by the Railroad from 1925 was one of the direct inspirations, and it's not hard to see how like almost exactly they got some of these concepts from if you put them side by side.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean that is spot on.
Mm-hmm. So then they also used kind of the dilapidated effects from the Addams Family house from 1930s. So if you look in the Addams Family, I do have this one here. So you can see very similar concepts. They've got that kind of like long tower in the center.
Oh, Lurch? He is pretty tall.
And then they also used the Fourth Ward School in Virginia City, Nevada. Fourth Ward School in Virginia City in Nevada is the other one, which looks like this.
Oh. Oh, wow.
I'm ready to go.
Holy cow.
So yeah, they took the inspiration from kind of all of those places and then just combined them, as well as that Harper Goff concept for Mickey Mouse Park, which is what Kirk showed you originally. That was a Harper Goff one. So that those were kind of their inspirations. The Imagineers thought, if you remember Haunted Mansion history, originally Walt Disney was like, I don't want a rundown house. Like there's going to be no rundown houses in Disneyland. So we have this one that was actually a Ken Anderson that was then later colorized by Sam McKim. But Walt Disney's like, no, we're not going to do a rundown house. We want everything in Disneyland to look pristine. So this is such a huge departure from what Walt Disney wanted was that clean look. But actually, I think it works really well in this park because of the theme and the storyline behind this, the idea that this is a ghost town. Like, you wouldn't have a pristine house on the hill. It would look weird, you know?
Yeah, like it's like almost abandoned style location at large. Where if you think about Liberty Square for us, it's very vibrant. There's a lot of things going on. There's still businesses that are operating. Where in this case, this frontier land is empty.
So we've got the two concepts side by side, and I'm going to try to make sure I can actually show you mine without hitting my mic, because there's something really cool in this guy.
The one that I have on the left is by an Imagineer, Julie Svendenson, and she did a concept art of what the house would have looked like prior to both the earthquake and the passing of Henry and Martha. So really pretty nice. Again, that just it's kind of crazy because when you look at Thunder Mesa and we saw some pictures of how the town is, this is a very dramatic departure from the way the town looks. It's really pristine, really nice. But as to what Kate had mentioned, in the clouds, there's a giant looming ominous skull, and it's actually got skulls over on its shoulder blades out through its wingspan into two human hands, and it's soaring over the home, giving us this ominous vibe that something very bad is going to happen to this very nice home. Which, you want to talk about yours and who you have in the sky?
Yeah, so I have kind of the post earthquake and bankrupt and everything going bust version of it, which is very haunted mansion-esque. Haunted house-esque, I should say. And then in the sky is the Phantom himself as a giant shadow, and it looks like his arm is being wrapped around the house, and it's all very spooky. There's kind of a lightning in the background. There's a lot of dead trees, and down. There's just it's very dilapidated looking, but in the sky is the creepiest part.
I think you need to also, when you think about what we just showed you, Kate's version is very demonic. It's very dark. It's very graphic and visceral, which I don't really find the haunted mansions, especially in the States, to really have that feel. Ooh boy, is this different. And so what Kate kind of alluded to earlier is we get a lot more skeleton, ghoul kind of vibe, and think of like that more gritty Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland beginning. Kind of reminds me a lot of what we get in Phantom Manor.
Yeah, and a lot of people who see the actual picture of this house might say it looks a lot like the Bates Motel from Psycho. And that is because the Bates Motel was based on that House by the Railroad painting by Edward Hopper as well. So they're both based on the same place. And that is why they look very similar. So you can see this is what the Bates Motel looks like in case you've forgotten or haven't seen Psycho.
I feel bad. Now I have a picture of Jeff Burke, the show producer, up, and we keep saying he's like a solitary guy. Although, isn't this kind of interesting? I just noticed that his jewelry-wise, big fan of turquoise, which is very American Southwest.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's dressing the part.
The shirt kind of screams Beetlejuice, but that's for another day.
Well, I will say just another note about this. So this is a American house from the 19th century with a Victorian style architecture, wooden roof, multiple floors, and a style of porch that was very popular in the time of at the time in San Francisco. So that wraparound porch that goes all the way around the front is very much iconic for that area of the country. So right, pulling out of the West, right? And something that I thought was really interesting that a lot of people might not notice about the Phantom Manor is the way that it's painted on the outside actually makes it look like it's weathered on one side. So they use darker colors on the right side of it as bad weather comes from the east. So it's that one looks like an older photo of this because it's different colors, I think. You have one that was probably from the original. I'm trying to find one of it now. But it's very slight, it's very subtle, but it is there. Though they're very intentional about how, like, well, the weather and the wind comes from one side. So we're going to make this authentic as possible, which I think is really cool.
That's awesome. The one thing that is so cool about Phantom Manor versus Haunted Mansion in particular in Florida, Disneyland, you guys are used to this going through the front door. We get to go and walk around that wraparound porch and enter in, which gives one thing that Disneyland doesn't have, an elevated view of not only Big Thunder, but also all of Thunder Mesa. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous view. And I always think about when we're waiting in Florida's Haunted Mansion, we're stuck. We're going through like the butler's side door, like we're not even, like we don't get anything. We're literally just under an awning going into, I feel like almost like the basement, right? Where the view is just so gorgeous from Paris. But yeah, I think we stop here before we get into all the strange sightings and mysterious occurrences that happen on the grounds of the Phantom Manor.
Yeah, I think next week we step into, we go into the queue, we go into the manor, we start getting a little stretch in the stretching room, which we've already talked about a little bit, so we can spend maybe a little less time there, and head into the attraction itself. And yeah, I mean, we didn't get far. I was going to say we got far. We didn't get very far, but that's fine.
No, I mean, usually we don't do music and stuff. That doesn't usually happen. Usually we get through concept art and that's about it. But there's also a little bit less in terms of volume of things to pull from for Disneyland Paris. But I'm very, very excited to go in depth into the manor.
Yeah,
it's so cool, kids.
It's such a cool story. I do want to say that in case you're wondering what book that I have been pulling out, this one is called Phantom Manor, and it's called Attraction Decrypted, essentially, but it's in French and English. This one I got directly from Disneyland Paris, and it goes over a lot of the concept art. It also goes over a lot of the changes they made in it, but it's really beautifully designed, and it does give some really behind the scenes things. It's not a cheap one to order from the US, unfortunately. So it's kind of a tough one to get. But that is one that I would definitely recommend if you're just like a Phantom Manor, a Haunted Mansion fan, and you're like, I need this in my collection. Then we also have that other book that you and I have used before. That's called...
I also have this one too.
Oh yeah, you have that one. So I have The Haunted Mansion, Imagineering a Disney Classic by Jason Sorrell. And some of the information on Phantom Manor is like outdated, but it's fun because it actually goes back to that earlier version before they did their renovation.
Yeah, the 92 story. And then I also pull from Mark Davis's, in his own words, Imagineering the Disney Parks. This is not a cheap book either, but this one is good if you're like me and you just like to look at pictures.
And like short pieces of text, like quotes and things.
Who doesn't want to see Walt with a hippo?
Oh my gosh, I love that picture. Every time I see it, it makes me happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Distery with Kate and Kirk. We really loved having you along for this journey as we start this new series about the Phantom Manor in Disneyland Paris. Kirk, do you have any final thoughts before we leave for the evening?
Which is Ghostly thanks for chilling with us. We super appreciate it. And this is going to be an awesome series.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. All right. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you next time for Distery.